How you doing, YouTube? Matt Massive Beer Reviews, back with yet another review, and a little bit of, weird beer. Not necessarily a weird beer, it's Helles, but, weird in how it kind of gets here, in this can, in the form of Schlenkerla Brewing. It is their Helles Lager. I've had this before. It's been a super long time since I've had it, and, recently, over the past year or so, it's actually been available in cans. More times than not, you're going to see it in that typical Schlenkler bottle, that they see a lot of their bigger smoked beers in. But this gets kind of imported by B United or OEC Brewing, and they can it themselves. They bring it over in a big tanker. They show you a little picture of the tanker truck in the back of the son bitch. And, they kind of can it here, and then they sell it that way. I would say that's weird, like, when I started the video, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not that weird, because if you know Mateus and the whole gang up there at B United, more specifically OEC Brewing, they just do weird shit in general. I've reviewed a couple of the beers that actually produce there. OEC, that's the end of it. It's B United, it's the importer. They've been around forever. Then you have OEC, which is the actual brewer portion of the show, and they just do weird shit up there. They some of their beers, they do a lot of like mixed fermentation, funky stuff. But they do this Zimitor series, and I've reviewed it before. Actually, I don't think I have any of the bottles up there anymore, but I've reviewed a couple of the Zimitor series, and what they do is they actually take other people's beer, and then they barrel age it. They did a J.W. Lee's variant. They did a couple different ones. You can go actually search my old backlog for some of the stuff that they've done in the past. But this is something that they just kind of bring over in a tanker, like I said, and they kind of can it and distribute it that way. So yeah, is that weird? I don't know. I actually have a sneaking suspicion that they just love chugging this beer and they figured, fuck it. We'll just bring it over and we'll put it in cans. That way we have it available 24/7. That's kind of the shit that they do. Anyway, long-winded intro, about to get longer. What do we have here? Let's butcher some words. It's Dem Batterisch in Reinheitsgebot. No idea. Helles Schlenkerla Lager Beer, unfiltered. Brauerei Heller, Bamberg, Germany. On the back here is Schlenkerla is a historic smoked beer brewery. Helles Schlenkerla Lager is brewed with fine Bavarian aroma hops and lagered in 14th century beer cellars underneath the Schlenkerla brewery and maltings. It is boiled in the same copper kettles and bottom fermented in the same yeast as a classic Aecht Schlenkerla Rush beer. Its subtle smokiness hence makes this Schlenkerla style a unique representative of the traditional German beer style Helles. 4.3% alcohol by volume, done and done. Label, which just pretty much looks like pretty much every Schlenkerla label, except it's on a can. It's a sticker can. This is a sticker can. People don't not wait in line for this. This actually just comes from up there in OEC like this. Oh man, look at that thing just kind of popping out of there. I don't think the head's going to stick around all that long, but that'd be a head on a beer. So anyway, what do we have? A horribly fantastical pour by myself, but to be perfectly honest with you, that was not my fault that it came out of the can like that. It just basically jumped out like a mofo. You actually have a subtle kind of funky particulate kind of haze to it. It's not a super clear beer when you're talking about a traditional kind of Helles lager. You expect it to be a little bit clear, not as particulate driven, but hey, there it is. 3 fingers, almost 4 fingers of, that was a pretty decently creamy head that is now just kind of collapsed upon itself and is super rocky, super foamy. And does she look like a Helles? Not really, especially with that kind of bit and piece haze kind of floating around in there, but yeah. You can smell the lager yeast, and you can smell that smokiness from a distance. That's the craziest part about it. And we'll get to that a little bit in the actual review itself. So, let's get a nose on her. Yeah, you get that little bit of funky, kind of sulfur-free kind of lager yeast, but on top of that you get that soft, very gentle kind of smokiness. Now, they don't say they use a smoked malt in here. They say that's kind of derived just because they're in the brewery. A lot of people actually say, okay, it's a they've been using the same yeast, proprietary yeast for so long that the yeast itself has kind of morphed like some kind of X-Men mutant to actually produce a smoky character. I don't know about that. but it's definitely there. My 2 cents, because I've never been to the brewery, but my guess is almost every single thing they do is over the top, crazy, smoked beef jerky style kind of craziness. Is that, it's kind of like going into a smoking bar. It's kind of like going into any place that actually has its own distinct smell, like a candle shop or something like that. When you come home, you smell like that. I believe, from the water to the hops to the malt, there's just probably such a pungent aroma in it and just a smoked craziness. This is all assumptions, like I said. I haven't been to the brewery, but I assume it's just smoke craziness going on. It has to permeate into some of the materials. Is it just a mutated yeast that does that? I don't know. That's my guess. That's my 2 cents, but we'll see what's what. But yeah, so soft lager, funkiness with a bit of smokiness. Not very sweet, not very bitter, very balanced. It smells like a Helles, but a little bit of a smoked characteristic to it. So let's dive in. Cheers. Man, that's very rich for me. That has a nice sweetness to it. It's almost getting to the point where it's a little bit too sweet, but it stops just short. That sweet, nice, rich maltiness. It's like north of like a kind of Pilsner malt, but it's definitely south of something a bit bigger, like a caramel, like a rich kind of caramelly kind of maltiness, somewhere in between. But you get that subtle smokiness, which kind of adds a kind of balancing act to it, because you do get a little bit of soft bitterness from the hops. You get that rich sweetness from the actual malt itself. Now, if it was just a matter of hops and malt, I believe it would be a kind of imbalance. I think it would be a little bit too sweet, but you add that smoke character to it, and then what it does is it adds a third component that I think balances it off and keeps the beer from getting a little bit too sweet. Yeah, it has a nice soft mouthfeel to it too. Like I said, it's starting to settle down a little bit, but you still see a little bit of kind of protein bits and pieces kind of floating around in there. That might have been just stuff kind of settling in the bottom. I do not know. And when this can kind of exploded onto itself, maybe it just kind of mixed itself up. But here's the other thing too. You have OEC, and I'm not saying they don't know what they're doing, but you have them kind of bringing this beer in a big tanker truck, and they're filling cans. Well, who knows? Maybe this is cans that came from, the bottom of the tanker, if there is anything kind of bits and pieces left in it when they actually go to can it. Yeah. But all in all, it's delicious. It gets a little bit creamier, a little bit more robust, a little bit more depth to it than your base lager. But you're struck with that kind of nice, punchy kind of lager funkiness. That smokiness adds an added depth to it that adds a little bit more balance to it than just the hops can do with how sweet the beer is. And just ends up coming off as like a super big chugger. And this is coming from a guy who's not a big smoked beer kind of dude. If anybody says, is there any beer style you don't like? If I'm going to give him any answer, it's going to be a Rausch beer. It just doesn't work for me. A lot of the Schlenkerla stuff, the bigger ones, while I appreciate them, just not necessarily my favorite style of beer. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll grow into them like I have several other styles over the years. But just not necessarily my favorite style of beer. But this one kind of works. And it works in a sense that it gives me a little bit of what I don't like, which, oddly enough, I think kind of turns me on a little bit. When I start to get into kind of these smoked beers that are, I hesitate to even call this a smoked beer, but when I get into smoked beers that give me a little bit of subtle smokiness and then have other redeeming qualities going on, I tend to be quite the happy camper. And this one is much the same. Listen, it's a weird beer for me in that it follows. It's a chugger. It says, what is that, 4.3%. It's a session beer. It's something you would chug the living shit out of. But at the same time, it's an impact beer. It's not tiny. You expect a 4.3% house lager to be kind of just what you would drink, and it become something that is a little bit of white noise when it comes to, let's say, a drinking session. It becomes the background. This, to me, is impactful enough to carry a conversation about itself, while at the same time has the lower ABVs to kind of carry itself as a session beer. So I just did my best ofs of the year, and right before that I actually did my favorite podcasts of the year, and I talked about several different podcasts, and one I talked about was Steal This Beer, and Augie Carton from Steal This Beer. And he has this thing that he likes to tell people to do about beer, and that he's like, quit when people get too wrapped up in like ticking boxes and untapping the shit and stuff. He has this kind of thing where he tells people to pump the brakes, just drink one beer for a whole month straight, and see how that beer kind of works and changes and develops for you over that month's period of time. This is a beer I'd like to do that with. Maybe on a smaller scale, do it for a weekend or do it for a whole day. Like, where I'm literally talking a session beer. If you're going to go golfing, you're going to go barbecuing, you're going to do everything, just drink this over the course of a day. I think this beer could actually give you different angles over time, depending on temperature, mindset, that whole thing. So, there, with it being 4.3%, and the fact that it's chuggable, and the fact that it brings such unique characteristics to a style that I don't want to call boring, but is a little bit boilerplate, it's just a fun beer. It's a fun beer and a cool beer, and it's in fucking cans now, and that's pretty fucking cool. So let's talk about it. Is it one of the better Helles that I've had as of late? Actually, yeah, it's probably the best one I've had. It works for me. And like I said, I'm not a smoke guy, but that little added just flick of smokiness just kind of works for me. Value and availability, I think I paid for like $14 for the 4-pack. I picked it up off the shelf and leave you with, if you like what? Will you like this beer? And if you like smoked flavors in general, you're not going to get heaping helpings of it here, but it's going to give you enough to kind of turn you on, I guess. And if you like crushers, but crushers that have impact, you like classic German beers, you like chugging beers, this is a chugging beer. So there you go, another review in the books. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Down there if you want to talk about it. Massive Beers if you want to check me out doing the social media stuff. Beer Massive if you want to check me out doing the whole podcasting thing. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the review. Hopefully you're enjoying a nice little Schlenkerla lager right now, and hope to see you next time. Cheers.